Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to make a delicata squash pot pie, and this is a recipe that I've kind of changed and morphed over the years, but I love it because it's absolutely loaded with vegetables, and we're just coming into September here and the harvest is plenty. So I don't know if you grew a garden last year or not, but if you did, this pot pie is full of basically all of those veggies that you would have grown. Potatoes and carrots and onions and peppers, and then the star is this delicata squash. And this is a new squash for us at Davison Orchards. We just started growing it, but it is a gem. It is sweet and it's great roasted, just with salt and pepper in the oven, but this squash is awesome in this pot pie, so that's what we're gonna get to today. So before I get to the squash this morning, I'm gonna start with the meat. Now the meat that I enjoy the best in this pot pie is actually our apple cider sausage from the farm, and it's a mild flavor, but it really adds something special to the squash with the sausage mixed is really nice. So I'm gonna start by preheating my Dutch oven, and I'm gonna brown that. I'm not sure whether you have a Dutch oven or not. If you don't, you can do this in a regular pot, but the Dutch oven just really holds the heat really well and it's nice and consistent. So if you've got one, this is the perfect recipe. So what we're gonna do is we're going to just open up this package of sausage, and we're going to squeeze the sausage out of the casing because we're going to chop it up into small pieces. So much like ground beef in the end, and you just need to squeeze it out. I'm just going to chop this up. As my pan heats up, that'll start browning. Okay, so we can leave that. We're gonna start with our onion, and this is one of the sweet Walla Walla onions that we grow at Davison Orchards. We don't need the whole thing. We need about 1 cup of chopped onion. So I'll probably use about half of it. And set that aside. I like to cut the bottom core off and peel the outer layer off. And then get chopping. My next thing will be garlic, so I'll probably use about 2 or 3 cloves of garlic, depending on how big the cloves are. And this is locally grown garlic as well. I always just smash it with the side of my knife. That helps get the peelings off. And then roughly chop it. Gonna give it a stir every once in a while. I'm gonna get working on the squash, but while I'm doing that, my helpers here, Jacob and Levi, are gonna peel our carrots in preparation for that. So I've given this squash a rinse, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it in half. So it's much easier to cut through than some. So that's what it looks like in the inside. So all the seeds are throughout, and we're just gonna take this handy dandy tool that I seem to use for everything, and use it to scrape out the seeds. Well, again, is handy just because it gets all of the seeds and strings out really well with these little teeth that it's got. A spoon can work as well. It's a little more scraping. Alrighty, so for this recipe, I'm gonna put half of the squash inside the stew, and the other half I'm going to cook in the microwave, and then I'm gonna put that in the biscuit that goes on top of the pot pie. So I just put a tiny bit of water into a dish that's microwave safe, put it on top with the lid, and then I'm gonna microwave that for 10 minutes. And that will soften the flesh so that I can mash it and put it inside the biscuit. While that's happening, I'm gonna give this one more stir. And now that my meat is all browned and cooked, I'm gonna add my onions and garlic. Give that a stir, and then let it cook. The delicata squash that's gonna go inside the stew, I'm just gonna turn it upside down and cut it like this into strips. I just find that this is the easiest way to peel it. So this is what I do. So then I just pick these up individually and very carefully just peel the skin off. then with these pieces, then I'm just gonna cut them into little cubes. And they'll go into the stew just like that. I usually cut the carrot into 4 and then cut the pieces up just into little bite size so that you can eat the stew with a spoon kind of idea. Okay, so we've got about a cup of chopped up carrots here. We've got half of our delicata squash cut up, and this all can go in the pot. I always like to stir my pot one time before I throw the next ingredient in. This looks awesome. I love the way that it's browned and the onions are more translucent. The carrots can go in, and the squash. And then at this point, whoopsies, we're gonna put our liquid in there. Do you wanna give that a stir, Levi? We're gonna put in about 3 cups of chicken broth. And then I'm just gonna add 1 more cup of water. Now I'll turn it up to about medium, and then again, I'm gonna go back to my chopping and just let this cook. Okay, so our last couple ingredients here, vegetables. We gotta get as many veggies as we can into that pot pie. So I've got a green pepper and a red pepper. And just an interesting fact, do you know that red peppers are just overripe green peppers? That's why they're sweeter. They have been on the vine longer. Anyway, I love adding both of these because they just add a lot of color and pop to the pot pie. So I just cut it in half and then pull out the core here and this inner membrane. Cut the top off. Just slice it. However, these ones don't have very much. I'm gonna cut this into strips, and then the boys will cube it up for us. Good job. Again, I just love those peppers in that pot because it just brightens that stew. It's just gorgeous. Okay, last but not least, we're gonna get our potatoes in there. I like using these new potatoes because you don't have to peel them. Just wash them, and then I cut them in half and then cut them in quarters. If it's a bigger one, then I'll cut them a little bit smaller, but these can be a little bit bigger. Okay. So this looks amazing, and at this point we are going to turn it up and let it cook. So just before I do that, I'm going to add my spices. 1 teaspoon of rosemary in, 1 teaspoon of thyme, half a teaspoon of pepper, and I don't need any salt because of my chicken broth was really salty. Depending on what chicken broth you use, you might want to add some salt to taste. Now we're going to put the lid on, and this is when your Dutch oven comes in handy. These nice cast iron lids hold the moisture in there so well. We are now going to work on the biscuit for the top of this pot pie, which is basically what changes this recipe from a stew to a pot pie. So if you're feeling like you're happy with just a stew and you don't want to take this last step, you can totally do that. Maybe just serve your stew with buns. But if you want to turn it into a pot pie and just go that extra step, then you can put these biscuits on top. I've taken the other half of my delicata squash out of the microwave, and I just took the lid off. 10 minutes was perfect. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna scoop this out, and this is an amazingly moist squash. It's gonna make for an amazing biscuit. I'm going to use all of this squash in my biscuit. If you had leftover squash from another meal, or you even wanted to use pumpkin, you could do that. And then we're looking for about 3/4 of a cup of squash. The rest of the biscuit, we are going to use this Farmhouse scone mix. I love this product because it's so versatile, and it takes a step out of a meal that's got a few steps in it. And it's exactly what I need. But it's basically just a biscuit mix. So again, if you don't have this scone mix on hand, you can just look up a recipe for a biscuit. We actually have one on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out. So we need a 1.5 cups of this mix to make our biscuit. It's about half the package. We're looking for 3/4 of a cup of milk. Add that straight to our squash. Jacob, do you want to get a fork and mix that in? Mix your squash and your milk together. And then we'll dump our scone mix in there. Now, depending on your squash, if it was a moist squash or a bit of a drier squash, you may or may not need to add a little bit more milk. What you're looking for is a certain consistency. This is actually looking perfect. We want it to be moist, but not too wet. Been cooking for about 10 minutes. We'll check it. Looking awesome. The veggies are going to continue to cook after we put our biscuit in here, but we do want them to be soft. As this pot cooks, the squash will actually break down and really help thicken this stew. So, and that's just a beautiful thing about adding the squash into here is that it's like it ends up being a natural thickener for your stew, so you won't need to add any cornstarch or anything else to thicken it. We are going to just drop these biscuits into the stew. I like to just use 2 spoons, and I'll show you how I do it. So you just take a scoop and drop it in. As you can see, I'm not measuring anything, I'm just winging it. So I just fill the holes as I go. Okay, we're gonna quickly get the lid on, and then I'm gonna pop that whole pot in the oven for 15 minutes at 425. You don't wanna open the lid because the steam is what is indeed cooking those dumplings. So as my boys would say, this is the moment of truth when we lift the lid. Awesome. So there, it worked great. So the dumplings are cooked. Make sure they're still gooey, which they're not. Grab a biscuit, try and keep that on top. And serve it up. So that's how you make Delicata squash pot pie, and I hope you give it a try. I think you'll find you really enjoy it. If you found this video helpful, press the like button and subscribe for more videos.